What if events went differently, and Norman Osborn wasn't the only mad genius hidden behind a mask in 2002's Spider-Man? What if William Afton, the man behind the animatronics, traveled to New York to escape his past and found a partner in madness? Welcome back, fellow watchers of the multiverse. My name is Max Charlebois, aka Missed the Part, and today's Twisted Crossover is a Watcher of the Multiverse tier exclusive, officially brought to life by the one and only Mike S. Huge community shout out to Mike, not only for pitching this wicked idea, but for supporting the channel and helping build the darker side of the multiverse. You made this story possible. In this reimagined timeline, OsCorp isn't just working on military gliders, they're experimenting with something organic, something animatronic. When Norman Osborn crosses paths with William Afton, the two strike a deal. Osborn gives Afton access to resources. Afton provides animatronic security units, ones that are perfect for crowd control. But when the serum backfires and the Green Goblin is born, Afton doesn't flee, he evolves. Spider-Man now faces not only just one monster, but two: the Goblin from above and a mechanical army of possessed mascots, stalking the streets below. It's tech, it's terror, and it's 2002 Spider-Man like you've never seen it before. Want to build your own crossover like this? Join the monthly Watcher tier for early access and all sorts of different things. You can have your own weekly theme built, and I can help you build it here on the YouTube channel, and all of the support goes a long way. I do want to give a massive shout out to the streams. We are live streaming on Mondays and Fridays, and the Discord server is also opened. With that being said, watch the skies for gliders, check the shadows for wires, and never trust a laugh from behind a metal mask. This is What If William Afton Worked with Norman Osborn. It began the way these stories always do. Familiar, safe, wrapped in the glossy colors of a New York afternoon. Peter Parker chased the school bus, yelling and flailing as his camera bag flapped at his hip. Flash Thompson smirked from the window, while MJ pretended not to notice him from her seat just 3 rows up. The yellow vehicle finally screeched to a halt, and Peter scrambled aboard, out of breath and fumbling his words. The others rolled their eyes. Midtown was already halfway to OsCorp's science facility by the time he found his seat. What none of them noticed, what no one even thought to ask, was who the second guest behind Norman Osborn was on that tour. As the Midtown students gathered around Dr. Strom and the glass-walled spider exhibit, Peter leaned in close, captivated. MJ was inches from him, admiring a shimmering red and blue arachnid suspended in a web. The spider, a product of OsCorp's genetic acceleration program, pulsed faintly with unnatural color. Peter admired the way it moved, delicate and deadly, just before it dropped down and bit him on the hand. He flinched, but said nothing. The others didn't notice. At the back of the group, an unfamiliar man in a worn lavender coat observed the class. Mid-50s, slicked back graying hair, a pale neck covered in subtle scar tissue, like half-melted wax. He stood beside Norman Osborn, hands folded, silent, unreadable. His name was William Afton. No one introduced him. He was never mentioned in OsCorp's press packets. He simply appeared in the building sometime last month and had not yet left. Norman had brought him on as a discreet consultant to help stabilize the military division's slipping contract. Specifically, Afton's reputation in animatronic containment and biomechanical systems had caught his attention. Quiet genius, dark history, no known patents, just rumors from decades ago about a robotics facility fire in New Jersey, and a whisper of work with child psychology and entertainment technology. Whatever else he was, Afton made results. Norman needed results. Back at OsCorp headquarters that evening, the boardroom lights burned low. Norman argued, his voice tight with restrained fury, as the board members repeated their ultimatums. OsCorp was on the verge of losing its military funding entirely. The glider was flashy, but unstable. The combat exosuit lacked consistency. The performance-enhancing formula remained unreliable and dangerous. If results weren't delivered within 2 weeks, they would sell the company's assets off in pieces. Norman sat alone in his office after the board left, head low, eyes shadowed. The only light came from the tank behind him, glowing faintly green. Then the door creaked open. Afton entered silently, carrying a covered steel frame on a wheeled cart. He didn't ask permission. "They want sleek," Norman muttered. "They want drones and data streams, remote-controlled cowards. They don't understand the battlefield." "And they never will," Afton replied softly. "But you do." He pulled back the canvas, revealing a metal frame underneath, a spring-lock suit, but redesigned. It had the musculature of a human torso fused into segmented steel, its limbs wired with tension rods and miniature gear pistons. The faceplate was smooth, but faintly etched with vertical scars. If the glider was OsCorp's future, this was its buried past. Something grotesque made beautiful through functionality. Every piece served a purpose. Original concept was for performance animatronics, Afton explained. Stage-ready entertainers. But I've long since abandoned aesthetics. Now the suit is built for control of the enemy or the self, of what's left after the body fails. Norman raised an eyebrow, both appalled and fascinated. "Why would you ever build such a thing?" Afton gave a tight smile. "Because some things don't die. They just lose direction." Across town, Peter Parker lay in bed, sweating and convulsing as his DNA rewrote itself. While Afton revealed the monster he'd made, Peter was becoming something new. Something impossibly agile and strong, still unaware of what he was turning into. The next morning, Peter saw without glasses, ran faster than the bus, outpaced Flash Thompson's punches, climbed walls. Webs shot from his wrists, unbidden and wild. The city blurred beneath him, thrilling and terrifying. He was changing, grieving too. Uncle Ben was dead, a carjacker he could have stopped. He'd failed. The streets of New York blurred in that late-night chase, but he caught the man, delivered him to justice, then fled into the alley to hide his tears. And someone watched from the shadows of a nearby fire escape. William Afton, half lost in the folds of his coat, watched the boy wall crawl up brick like an insect possessed. He took no photos. No recordings. He only whispered, "Interesting," and turned away. At OsCorp, Norman grew desperate. He entered the lab alone, injected the serum. The transformation occurred, faster, more violent than expected. Dr. Strum tried to stop it, but it was too late. Norman's shrieks split the air, then silence. When security arrived, Strum was dead. The glass tube shattered. Norman Osborn gone. Afton waited in his private lab, calm. A terminal screen flickered with neural activity graphs. He tapped a command. Secondary personality seed, transference complete. The next day, OsCorp's boardroom exploded. The Goblin arrived, but so did something else. Norman's madness was no longer his own. It was shared, guided. The spring-lock suit, modified and blacked out, now pulsed under his armor, like a second skeleton. Its teeth turned inward, its seams locked over flesh. Somewhere beneath the helmet, Norman heard not just himself, but something older, quieter, watching from the back of his brain. Peter, meanwhile, ascended. The Spider-Man suit was born. Photos taken, Crime stopped. The city began whispering his name. At night, he swung above glowing rooftops, and below, OsCorp dug deeper. Afton's spring-lock schematics had grown. He kept physical blueprints now rolled inside glass tubes, labeled Project Ballora, Subject 003, Bonnie Prototype, and Endo Containment Stage 3. One night during dinner at the Osborn residence, Peter arrived late. Harry introduced him. MJ smiled warmly. Aunt May gushed. But sitting at the far end of the table was William Afton, unmoving, untouched wine glass before him. His eyes followed Peter the entire night. As Peter stood in the kitchen, nursing a hand he'd sliced during a rooftop escape, he didn't notice Afton watching from the hallway mirror. Quiet, calculating. In his mind, he was already writing the report, Subject 002, exhibited enhanced strength, rapid healing, elevated situational awareness, and unique adaptive flexibility. Potential for suit compatibility, confirmed. And the voice recorder in his coat captured his final whisper of the night. This one might survive the spring locks. Spider-Man was becoming a fixture in the city. Day by day, headlines in the Daily Bugle flipped between condemning and praising him. J. Jonah Jameson roared across newsrooms with veins bulging from his forehead and demanding photographs that either proved Spider-Man was a criminal menace or, more dangerously, that he sold better than Superman. Peter, for his part, juggled his shaky freelance career with secret late-night rooftop patrols, slipping in and out of alleyways and windows like a rumor in motion. But deep beneath OsCorp Tower, the labs told a different story. William Afton had been moved to a more private research wing, a floor that didn't appear on blueprints. There, in a temperature-controlled chamber filled with reinforced wiring and cooling tubes, his true projects took shape. Suits stood upright, silent, but somehow expectant. One was silver-plated and sleeker than the crude prototype he'd shown Norman. Another had sharpened finger digits and a reinforced spinal shell. But none of them moved. Not yet. Afton stood among them like a priest among coffins, fine-tuning the metal restraints inside each chest cavity. The spring locks were more refined now, no longer just crushing devices, but intelligent ones. The suits could contract, press inward, and sustain a host. Theoretically, even a host whose original body had failed them. Upstairs, Norman Osborn stared into his mirror. He hadn't slept in 2 days. Not because of stress or serum side effects. No, what plagued him now were voices. Cold, metallic voices that hissed not with words but memories. Screams, music boxes, laughter that started as children's and twisted into something mechanical and wrong. When he wore the goblin mask now, it didn't feel like a mask. It felt like the suit locked into him. He couldn't always remember taking it off. Sometimes he woke up with the mask beside him in bed. He confronted Afton in the corridor one evening, slamming him into a lab wall. "They're inside me, William. I hear them. I feel them crawling. What have you done to me?" Afton only tilted his head, calm as glass. "You wore the suit. You gave it a voice. The rest is just legacy." A moment passed before Afton said something else. Quieter, as if remembering something that wasn't entirely his. "They told me I could bring her back too." Norman backed off, trembling. He didn't ask who she was. While OsCorp darkened from within, Peter's life spiraled in opposite directions. MJ was beginning to notice him. Harry, frustrated by his father's erratic behavior, saw Peter as both a friend and a threat. Aunt May grew worried about Peter's disappearing acts. And Peter himself, he had questions about OsCorp, about Norman, and most recently, about William Afton. Peter had broken into OsCorp's records. His hacking was crude, but the firewalls around Afton's files were even older. He bypassed them late one night and pulled up fragments, nothing linear but disturbing. Police reports from Hurricane Utah, names redacted, facility fires, children missing. A blurred photograph of what appeared to be a large humanoid rabbit with glinting teeth leaning over a stage. Beside it, the name Spring Bonnie. Then he found a schematic, endo-containment skeleton, 5'4", annotated with modifications to compensate for spinal mismatch and soul slippage. Peter stared at the screen in disbelief. This wasn't robotics, this was something older. Worse. The files terminated after a few seconds, vanishing in a forced overwrite. Someone had noticed him. That night, Spider-Man was lured to the Brooklyn shipyard. The Goblin attacked with fury unmatched from their last encounter. His glider screamed through the air like a banshee. But this time, Norman didn't wear his usual armor. He wore something leaner. One of Afton's integrated spring-lock suits, now fused with the Goblin tech. His limbs moved with unnatural sharpness. When Spider-Man struck him, the suit seemed to absorb the momentum, responding with doubled force. Their battle tore across the docks. Explosions lit the night sky. Shipping crates collapsed like toys. And at one point, the Goblin disappeared entirely, blending into shadow like the suit had erased him. Peter was losing. Every punch was countered. Every leap met with a blade. And then, worst of all, the voices. Peter began hearing them too. Not Norman's voice. Other ones. Children's voices. "Don't leave me," one whispered. Another, "It hurts inside the wires." Another, fainter, "We were happy once." Peter fell back, webbing a rusted container to shield himself. The Goblin dropped down, faceplate sliding open just enough to reveal Norman's sweating face. His eyes were yellowed, bloodshot, glassy with tears. "I can't stop it," Norman choked. "He won't let go." Then, almost as if surprised by his own, "Body." Norman raised his gauntlet and launched a concussion bomb point blank. Peter barely survived. He crawled into the sewers, broken ribs, his mask torn, bleeding from his mouth, but he escaped. He returned to his apartment hours later, collapsed in bed. In his half-conscious state, he remembered a detail: Afton's name on the blueprint next to a note. Remnant activation threshold must coincide with emotional peak. It wasn't just the tech. Afton had created something that fed on pain. Meanwhile, in the deep below OsCorp, Afton watched recorded footage of the Goblin's battle with Spider-Man, frame by frame. He paused it where Norman's suit absorbed one of Peter's punches and used it to reverse trajectory. "Fascinating," he muttered. Behind him, one of the prototype suits twitched for the first time. At Harry's penthouse, Norman staggered through the door at dawn, his shirt torn, his hands shaking. Harry asked what had happened. His father ignored him. Hours later, Norman vanished. The final scene of the act unfolds quietly. Peter sits on a rooftop holding MJ's birthday card. In the distance, police sirens wail. A news bulletin plays from a passing window. Another OsCorp lab explosion. Investigators baffled by cause. Reports of inhuman screeches. Peter doesn't say anything. He only whispers to himself. Something's wrong with Norman. And that man, Afton, he's not from this world. We descend downward, past the rooftops, through concrete, below OsCorp's foundations, until we reach a black sealed chamber. Inside, the disassembled remains of 3 animatronic suits are suspended in stasis tanks. The largest one, purple with a missing jaw, shudders once, and a distorted recording plays through the intercom. "I always come back." The city held its breath. In the days following the explosion at OsCorp, rumors began to swirl. A fire had gutted the lower laboratories, yet no bodies were recovered. Some claimed Norman Osborn had been seen leaping between rooftops in an unfamiliar suit. Others whispered of mechanical growls, like robotic wolves roaming the alleys after sundown. Peter knew the truth, at least enough of it. He knew Norman had become something more than the Green Goblin, something built, not born. And at the center of it all was William Afton, who had now disappeared entirely. His name was no longer in OsCorp records. His personnel files were wiped. Surveillance footage where he appeared, erased. It was as if he had never existed. Except Peter had seen his eyes, cold, calculating. Not cruel exactly, just empty. Peter returned to OsCorp at night, webbing through broken windows, descending into the gutted labs beneath. What he found there didn't belong to this world. Animatronic frames hung from ceiling chains like butchered beasts. Some were shaped like animals, others like warped humans with segmented spines and bolted teeth. A single, shattered nameplate rested on a workstation. Springlock Containment Rig Maquette. V Hybrid Interface Ready. Next to it was something worse. A recording still intact, stored in a decaying data capsule. Peter pressed play. A distorted voice, Afton's, spoke. Consciousness may linger even after death. If the suit is sealed during emotional peak, transference improves by 36%. Norman is proving highly compatible. The Goblin is the catalyst. But Parker may be the final step. Peter stepped back. His throat was dry. The recording ended with static, but faintly underneath the digital whine, he could hear children's laughter. Meanwhile, Norman watched from a derelict penthouse window, wrapped in a torn green cloak stitched with springlock threads. The remnant now coursed through him like a virus. His skin occasionally shimmered metal beneath the surface. He had full conversations with no one. Sometimes he addressed Afton. Sometimes he addressed his son. Sometimes he simply whispered to her. A voice the remnant had promised to restore if he gave himself over entirely. The goblin mask was gone. His face was the mask now. Peter knew it had to end. He told MJ he couldn't meet her at the diner. Told Aunt May he loved her without explanation. He left a letter on his desk for Harry, apologizing for being distant, for hiding the truth. He webbed across the city one last time, as the sun set in streaks of red and violet, casting the skyline in surreal light. It was the same hour Uncle Ben had died. He found Norman waiting. It wasn't at OsCorp. It wasn't at the bridge. It was somewhere unexpected. The old fairgrounds near Coney Island, long shut down. Broken rides, rusted clown heads. Music boxes half playing lullabies through rain-soaked speakers. Afton's old equipment was hidden here now, sealed in the remains of a former children's attraction called Circus Maze. Norman stood beneath a decaying carousel, unmoving. "You came," he said. "You knew I would," Peter replied. Norman smiled sadly. "He wanted you here, the one inside. Said you were the missing piece." They fought. It wasn't like before. No gliders, no bombs. It was brutal. Fists and claws and shrieks in the dark. The springlock suit had grown stronger. It moved before Norman did, reacting to Peter's every strike with violent elegance. At one point, it sprouted hooked cables from its spine, trying to pierce Peter's arms and bind him like a puppet. Peter dodged, flipped, used the environment. A funhouse mirror cracked as Norman slammed into it, his reflection multiplying into dozens of twisted images. Peter looked at himself, half mask torn, bruised, bleeding, and saw a child wearing a man's guilt. "You were my friend's father," Peter yelled. "You were a good man once." Norman laughed, no longer cruel, but tired. "No, Peter. I was always a monster. The goblin just gave me the right suit to wear." The climax came in seconds. Peter webbed a collapsing ride tower and yanked it down, pinning Norman. The suit screeched, crushed. Norman's face twitched. But then, the final play. Afton's voice spoke through Norman's throat. He's weak. Finish him. Make the suit yours. Peter hesitated. Norman used the pause to activate the last failsafe. His old goblin glider, now spring lock modified, rose from the ruins behind Peter like a ghost. Peter sensed it, leapt sideways. Norman wasn't so lucky. The glider impaled him through the ribs, again, but this time the spring locks reacted. They tightened inward, triggering hundreds of needle-fine gears inside the suit. Norman screamed, not as a villain, but as a man in agony. The suit contracted around his body, crushing bone, shearing muscle. He fell to the floor in a heap of sparking wires, twitching limbs, and silence. Peter collapsed beside him. A moment later, footsteps echoed behind them. Harry. He'd followed the trail. He saw it all. His father's twisted corpse in the mangled suit. Peter, mask in hand, kneeling beside him. He was the goblin? Harry asked. Peter nodded, unable to meet his eyes. Harry stepped forward. His hands trembled. Why didn't you stop him? I tried. They buried Norman Osborn 2 days later. A quiet, closed casket funeral. But not everyone knew the truth. Only Harry, Peter, and a few trusted men in OsCorp's inner circle. But something else happened. The coffin had to be sealed in a reinforced lead vault, because the suit wouldn't stop moving. Peter watched from a distance as the casket was lowered. MJ stood beside him, her hand in his. He didn't speak. Neither did she. Rain started to fall, long abandoned. Cameras flicker, lights die. Inside a chamber, the last backup prototype. One Afton had labeled Subject 06 Legacy Host. Boots up. The faceplate bears two identities, half Norman, half Afton. The screen goes black. A single voice cuts through. We always come back.
And that is going to be it for What If William Afton Worked with Norman Osborn. Now, what did you think of this alternate reality with Norman Osborn getting put into the spring lock suit at the last second with the glider pinning him to the wall? This was a very interesting Spider-Man and FNAF crossover video, and if you guys do enjoy these videos, do make sure to subscribe, like, share, and turn those notifications on so you and your friends are all up to date with the latest content. I want to give a massive community shout out to Mike S for requesting this video and locking it in. He was a watcher of the Multiverse tier here on the YouTube members only page, and you can get access to those benefits too. Do click the join button and you can see all of the different tier information. Again, I do want to give Mike S a massive shout out. And also, for those fellow watchers of the Multiverse out there, we have a brand new weekly series coming soon, or I guess a weekly themed series, and that is going to be Spider-Man Week. So Spider-Man Week is coming soon, and this is the bridge that we will be crossing over. And again, thank you guys so very much for watching. Do make sure to check out the Patreon, check out everything that you can to help support the YouTube channel and the great work that we do, because, you know, again, all of it is just, it's absolutely fantastic. We can't thank you guys enough. But again, thank you guys so very much, and I will see you in the next video. Take care, and have a wonderful day. Peace out.